following the Steam release, you have mentioned returning to villains and investigations villains and the investigations component, which you deem to be incomplete. Could you please elaborate on what that entails?
Well, so before we switched gears to the Steam stuff, I'm just going to mess up the years and stuff because of the pandemic, but it was like March 2020 or something. Endless March, was that Endless March? That's around the time we switched to the Steam release too, right? And at that time, we made that announcement saying that, first of all, we kind of just told Tanya and Kit Fox, because we signed that contract back in like November 2018 or something. We're like, oh, by the way, we're not going to work on this for a year. We got to do this villain release, which was, that's why we're where we're at now. But so we worked on the villain release for a year or something, a year and a half, whatever it ends up being, year and a half maybe. And got the World Gen part pretty much done, and then started on the Dwarf mode part and got the artifact heists done. Right. And then at that point, we were like, okay, our Steam contract, which, it's just was long in the tooth at that time. And we're like, we must switch gears. We must get this started. And then we released. We tied it up as best we could and released. And that means that we did not finish the Dwarf mode villain stuff, and we didn't even start the Adventure mode villain stuff. That's a lot of stuff. So every plot that we have in World Gen, which there are a variety of plots, there are coups, assassinations, flipping people to get them on the side in your organization, theft of artifacts, which is the one we got in. More, I can't remember because it's a list of things, and so I always forget a few. Those things all getting into Dwarf mode. And then over in Adventure mode, the idea was that you'd be able to investigate these plots, but also you'd be able to lead these plots with your own, because we had that party stuff, right? We had your party, and you've always had companions, and you would be able to send them out because the plots that the people do in the fort mode, the heists, use the same kind of, it's called an army controller in the game code. It's just what is this person who's wandering on the world map doing? You could just give those to your companions and they wander off, and then they just be under the same code that your squads are in Dwarf mode, right? It's all the same. And that means you can also in Fort mode. This was another idea in Fort mode, being able to send out assassins and I mean, you can already send out people to search for artifacts, but it's not a nefarious enterprise. I mean, it's not any more nefarious than the many things your dwarves do when they're being dwarfy, but actually running like mafia dwarves is not something that's currently a thing, but could very well be a thing easily with the Fort mode and doing coups and things, like Bolton.
That's something I'm extremely interested in, which if we have time, there's some questions in the category that I might sneak that into about future stuff and politics in Dwarf Fortress, whether they be literal government politics or like sects and cults and criminal organization politics. Very interesting.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can dive into that right now if you want, Tekid.
I mean, I guess so. It's just that those questions were so far down on the list,
True.
But anyway, I actually wanted to ask at some point. It seems like several people have kind of touched on this stuff. Originally, my question was just going to be about necromancers and whether or not necromancers might get adjusted in the way that they are made and the way that they can affect the world with myths and magic. And then I became curious about, in general, Dwarf Fortress the game as we move into myths and magic. And you mentioned an army update, which I don't know much about. Is there going to be a big change to the sort of overarching world politics and geopolitics of a Dwarf Fortress world? Is that going to become part of the game?
Yeah. So there's lots of parts to this. The basic flow, I guess probably the best way to talk about it, maybe just the basic flow of what we've already planned to add and when we plan to add it. So the villains and stuff adds just a bit of flavor along those lines. with some of these hidden organizations and so forth, and the coups and things, but they don't actually change like government organization, how it's organized. You can replace the king, but you don't have like suddenly like a council ruling or something like that, right? So not a big change. And it doesn't really talk about what the people think about it, that kind of thing. So you get through that, and then you get to the army arc, which is you don't know a lot about it. We don't know that much about it either. We have our notes, but basically we just wanted to get the pieces moving there, in fort mode and adventure mode, having some political stuff there has been promised, in terms of the adventurer, for instance, being able to marshal an army, which implies certain things about what their position is. But that's meant to be pretty bare bones because of what we need to get to. So once you get to that, we had the kind of this difficult decision to make, which is like there's the Myth Magic release, and part of the Myth Magic release is the big map rewrite that needs to happen. And then the other big thing that we wanted to do was starting scenarios, is kind of what we initially called the release, which is like, why is your fort here? What is the purpose of this fort? How does it relate to the larger civilization? How does it relate to the world? Is it a religious sect that fled for some reason? Is it a prison colony? Is it just like how it feels more now? It's sort of an unofficially sanctioned settlement, expansion into unsettled by dwarves territory. Vaguely promised some kind of barony if they do well, that kind of thing. And also potentially the new home of the monarch, which it seems like you're guaranteed that if you do really well. That thing, like specifying what that means, and then that release idea turned into this whole entity rewrite release, which is figuring out, what are laws and what are government structures, and can we get, nomadic groups in the game, all of that kind of thing. So there's this was also in tension with back in 2007 or something. I don't remember when, the whole caravan arc thing. I've lost the year of when we were initially working on that, because we want the economy is a big important thing too, because we used to have it in the game, then we got rid of it. And so that the point of the entity rewrite partially was to make the economy have a much stronger footing. So all of those things go together, and then you just throw boats in there because boats are fun. So all of those things, those four things, the current order is not really fully decided, except that we're doing Myth and Magic first because it's a fantasy game and we want to do some cool crap, and then do the entity rewrite, and then the economy and boats can fight. And maybe boats are just part of the economy because they always are, because water transport is so cheap. Mm-hmm. And so I mean, that probably is a yes answer to a lot of your questions, like typical with Dwarf Fortress, but also will be very old people.
Yeah, because something with Dwarf Fortress, obviously there's a ton of density in the game. There's obviously tons of complexity. Everybody knows that about Dwarf Fortress. And I find though that a lot of that happens just inside the fort in the mechanical bits of the game, like you're making a thing or you're fighting a goblin or whatever. And then right now, the state of the game right now, the one thing that still seems kind of small, despite being literally quite large, is the way that the outside world comes to your fort and why, or the way that your fort goes to the outside world and why. At the moment, it's still very much doing the same thing that the games inspired by Dwarf Fortress took away, like a raid shows up. Who's raiding you, and that determines exactly what units show up. But for the most part, it's all very just like survive raids or Hill Titan, which of course is a lot of fun. But just thinking forgive me for just brainstorming and thinking out loud, but I can't help myself. Like, imagine a diplomat shows up to your fort and is like, your civilization's government has been overthrown. It's now a republic. And if you don't want to submit to your new rule, we are going to war with you as an outside faction or something. And then you have to sign off on that. That sounds like something really interesting. And obviously that's just something I'm brainstorming. that kind of thing, I'm wondering, and I guess you said basically probably yes to that. That's what I was wondering, though, is that kind of thing potentially happening to forts in the distant future?
I think that kind of thing is probably it's not exactly that kind of thing, but
Yeah.
the ideas like that are coming sooner with the army arc, because the army arc and the villain arc kind of touch each other in that way, where there's leaders that have plans and will have armies and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because like the raids you mentioned, right? They step up now. They have triggers. I just put those into the difficulty settings and stuff or whatever. Like these triggers, like it's a tower defense game practically. And the army arc is, as best we can, supposed to cut that. We'd like to cut that and just have it be the world as you relate to it. Now that doesn't get all the way into the political stuff, of course. And we've teased or put our finger into that stuff when you're allowed to reject your elevation to a barony, right? And that was kind of meant to give us a pathway toward conflict with your own civilization. And that's the kind of thing that the starting scenarios will start to enable, or put you in that position in the beginning. Like if you wanted to be a rebel faction in the beginning, you would be able to just select that option. And that entails all kinds of extra information and structures and moving parts, which is exactly the kind of thing you want, right?
Oh yeah.
And so it's it's all coming in pieces, and hopefully we practically got it on a timeline now, even if the timeline is taking us to 2032. A year which I'm sure will be very healthy for everybody. Everything's
Right now we're working on buttons.
And yes,
scroll bars.
gets
This thing out there.
It'll get out there. Yeah.
I just want to be able to stop wars once they've started.
Yeah, that's not the hardest thing in the world to do.
Just take all these
this-
artifact socks and go away.
Yeah, well that part you have. They just, I mean, because did we
Yeah, I don't know.
did we log that?
Yeah, I think
We
that
must
was
have logged
logged.
that. The
The
parlay
armies
the
can be
The
turned
the
away.
parlay works. Yeah, the parlay
works. I don't know if it works if you deny them and they come again. I don't know if they'll listen to you, but
Yeah, or even if you give them stuff, does the
No,
war
that
stop?
works.
Does
That
the war
works.
actually stop?
yeah,
Or do they just come
Does the
again
war-
and ask for
the
more?
question is, did the war start? So you can just give, before the war starts, you can give them all your stuff and they want to tag you. That is confirmed. That works.
Yeah, I guess we're talking about the difference between an actual siege and just a state of declared war on the C screen, or the.
Oh yeah, well if the war exists, they will ask for your stuff and leave if you give it to them.
Yeah, but then the war, that we could make it declare peace at that time, and then there won't be a war. But then
They'll never come back.
then they'll never come back.
Yeah, but why would they never?
They should just come for your stuff again.